Snow doesn't muffle sound the way people think it does. It absorbs the soft things, the rustle of boots on pavement, the idle hum of a city settling in for the night. But the hard sounds, the ones with edges, they carried just fine. Tegan had learned that a long time ago, in a place where the difference between a muffled sound and a carrying one was the difference between coming home and not. She was standing at the triage desk of St. Marguerite's General, second floor, the overflow unit they'd started calling the shelf because everything that didn't fit elsewhere got stacked up here. A slow Tuesday in February. The kind of night that felt padded, insulated, unremarkable. Outside, Winnipeg was doing what Winnipeg did in February, punishing everyone who lived there for choosing to stay. Tegan didn't mind the cold. She'd stopped minding a lot of things. She was 34 years old, though the staff here seemed to have collectively decided she was older. It was the silence, probably. Young nurses filled the quiet with noise. They laughed too loud on break, played music through their phones while restocking supply carts, traded gossip at the nursing station like it was currency. Tegan restocked in silence. She charted in silence. When she walked the unit, her footsteps were measured, deliberate landing, with a practiced evenness that had nothing to do with soft-soled hospital shoes and everything to do with years of moving through places where being heard meant being targeted. She'd been at St. Marguerite's for 14 months. Before that, a smaller hospital in Brandon. Before that, nothing she talked about. The unit clerk, a young man named Felix, who wore the same 3 rotating hoodies under his scrub top all winter, spun in his chair and pointed a pen at her. Bed 7's buzzer has been going off for 6 minutes. I heard it, Tegan said. You're just going to let it go? He was discharged an hour ago. He's pushing the call button because he wants company, not because he needs a nurse. She didn't look up from the chart she was annotating. He'll stop in another 4 minutes when he realizes no one's coming. Felix blinked at her. That's kind of cold. That's triage, Tegan said. He turned back to his screen. She could feel him deciding something about her, filing her under whatever category he used for women who didn't explain themselves. She'd been filed in a lot of categories over the years. She'd stopped caring about the labels. The buzzer from bed 7 stopped at the 3-minute mark, not the 4. She noted it without satisfaction. Prediction wasn't a skill she'd cultivated for hospital work. The unit was quiet for another 40 minutes. A patient with a post-surgical fever. A man in his 70s with chest pressure that turned out to be anxiety, which Tegan diagnosed from the doorway by the way he was gripping the blanket. White-knuckled at the center, not the edges, the grip of a man catastrophizing, not a man in cardiac distress. She ordered the ECG anyway. She always ordered the ECG. At 20 past midnight, she was in the medication room, counting controlled substances when she heard the elevator. Not the sound of the doors opening. The weight of the footsteps that followed, she'd learned, in the years she didn't discuss, to identify people by their gait before she could see them. The hallways at St. Marguerite's had a particular acoustic quality, flat floors and low ceilings that bounced sound back with a kind of delay, and she had unconsciously memorized the walking patterns of everyone on her unit. Felix shuffled, always, with a faint scuff on the left heel. Dr. Weeb moved fast and leaned forward, her footsteps front-heavy and impatient. The night porter moved with a steady rolling rhythm and always smelled faintly of industrial lemon. These footsteps were none of those. 3 people. Coming off the elevator and pausing. That pause was deliberate, not uncertain. They were reading the unit, cataloging it. The way you catalog a space you've entered without being invited. Tegan set down the narcotics log. She didn't move immediately. She finished the count, 48, 49, 50. Because incomplete tasks left loose ends, and loose ends, in her experience, had a way of becoming problems. Then she walked out of the medication room and back toward the desk. They were standing in the hallway. The first one was a woman, late 30s, hair cut close to her head, a scar that started just below her left eye and curved toward her ear like someone had tried to take a piece of her face. She was standing at a slight angle to the door, her body bladed, her right hand resting near the hem of her jacket, not reaching, just resting. Tegan registered this without processing it into alarm. It was reflex. She recognized the posture because she'd worn it herself for years. You didn't leave that posture behind when you left. It just went underground. Beside her, a man in his early 40s with a thick jaw and a left arm that hung very slightly wrong. Not broken, not injured. Something reconstructed. Stood with his chin slightly down, his eyes moving across the unit in steady, methodical sweeps. He was assessing the nursing station, the exit doors, the positions of the other staff. The third was younger, maybe late 20s. He was leaning on a cane, and one of his legs, the right one, moved with the slightly too smooth precision of a prosthetic below the knee. His face was the most open of the three, and it was the most frightening because of it. He looked like someone who had decided not to be afraid of anything anymore. The way you decide after you've already survived the thing you were most afraid of. Tegan stopped at the nursing station. She did not approach them. Felix was staring. Do you have a patient here? Visiting hours are. We're looking for a nurse, the woman said. Her voice was calm, slightly accented. Quebecois, Tegan thought, smoothed by years or training or both. Her name is Tegan Marsh. Felix's head turned toward Tegan with the speed of someone who didn't know how to conceal a reaction. Tegan had known, before the woman finished the sentence, that her name was coming. She'd known somewhere at the base of her spine, in the old animal part of her nervous system that had never quite gone off duty. But knowing didn't stop the cold that moved through her chest. She walked around the end of the nursing station. She stopped 10 feet from them. Her hands were at her sides. You shouldn't be on this unit after midnight unless you have a patient here, she said. Her voice came out at its usual register. Flat, even, uninflected. This is a restricted floor. The woman looked at her for a long moment. Her jaw was working slightly, as if she was recalculating something. Corporal, she said finally. Not a rank, a word, a password, a name she was calling Tegan by the way you call someone, by a name they asked you not to use anymore. Tegan's hands stayed at her sides. You've got the wrong person, she said quietly. We drove 11 hours, the man with the reconstructed arm said. His voice was rougher, Anglophone, a maritime flatness to his vowels. From Petawawa, we're not lost. Felix had stopped pretending to type. Tegan could feel him behind her, perfectly still, the way people go still when they sense something in the air that they don't have language for yet. I'm going to ask you to leave, Tegan said. We know about Kandahar, the woman said. We know about the ambush on Route Hyena. We know what happened to your section. Tegan felt something shift in her chest, not a crack, a grind. Like tectonic plates moving a centimeter, the kind of motion you can't see from the surface. I'm a nurse, she said. I work nights. I'm asking you to leave my unit. We know that, the younger man said, the one with the cane. His voice was the quietest of the three. We've known where you were for a while. We needed to wait until we were ready. Ready for what? Tegan said. None of them answered immediately. The hallway was very quiet. Outside the window at the far end of the unit, Winnipeg was dark, the orange wash of sodium lights reflecting off the snowpack. Somewhere down the corridor, a patient turned in their bed, the frame creaking softly. "To say thank you," the woman said, "and to tell you what happened after." Tegan looked at the woman's scar. She looked at the man's arm, at the angle of it. She looked at the younger man's cane, at the way he held his weight. She turned and walked back to the nursing station. "Felix," she said, "go take your break." He stood up very quickly. He didn't say anything. He disappeared around the corner with the muted energy of someone who understood they'd just been given a gift. Tegan pulled out the spare chair from behind the desk and set it in the middle of the hallway without looking at them. Then she sat on the edge of the nurse's station counter, the way she'd been doing since she was posted at CFB Edmonton, and the desk in the forward medical station was too small to sit at properly. She crossed her arms. "Who are you?" she said. The woman stepped forward slightly. "Warrant Officer Serge Auclair." She tilted her head toward the man with the arm, Master Corporal Dale Ingram. The younger man, Private Theo Wexford, was private. "He's done." Wexford's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile. The kind of expression that had been a smile once, before it learned to be careful. Tegan looked at them. The names were not ones she'd been repeating to herself for years. They were not names from the night she'd been trying to organize and file and seal and move away from. They were names from 3 months before that night, from a patrol that had gone wrong in a smaller and less memorable way, a way that didn't make it into any reports because it had been resolved and everyone had walked away. Almost everyone. "Route Hyena," Tegan said. August, Auclair confirmed. "You were attached to 2 section, Tegan said. "You weren't in my section." "No," Auclair said, "but you were the one who responded." Tegan looked at her hands. She'd placed them flat on the counter on either side of her, and she was very aware of her own heartbeat. Measured, steady, the trained resting rate of someone who had worked very hard to stop feeling urgency in her body even when it was warranted. There was an IED. Secondary device. Your section's medic was gone immediately. I came across from the Beinson. She spoke flatly, factually, the way she might read from a report. Ingram had an arterial bleed in the arm. Auclair had fragment wounds, face and neck. Wexford had a crush injury below the right knee. I treated them in order of acuity. You did, Auclair said. That was my job. You also went back, Ingram said. Tegan stopped. For Lapointe, he said. The name hit her differently than she expected. Not like a fist, more like suddenly realizing you've been holding something heavy for so long that you forgot you were holding it, and someone else just pointed at your arms. Private First Class Etienne Lapointe, 22 years old. He'd been funny in the irritating way of 22-year-olds who haven't been anywhere yet. Loud at meals, always humming something, had a photograph of his mother taped to the inside of his helmet. He'd been caught in the second blast wave at the far edge of the road, 15 meters from where Tegan had set up the casualty collection point. She'd been told to hold position. The secondary device risk assessment was still active. The section commander had called it. Hold, wait for EOD, do not advance. She'd advanced. Lapointe didn't make it, Tegan said. No, Auclair said. I made the call wrong. I had 3 critically wounded. He was. She stopped, started again. The triage protocol was correct. I triaged him correctly. Her jaw tightened. I went back anyway. You stayed with him, Wexford said. He was looking at her directly, steadily, the way someone looks at another person when they have been practicing what they are going to say for a long time. You held his hand. You talked to him the whole time. He was scared, and you stayed. He was 22 years old, Tegan said. Her voice came out the same. She was proud of it for staying the same. He was scared, and I was the only one who could get to him. I'm not going to stand in a hospital hallway and accept a commendation for sitting next to a kid while he died. We're not here to give you a commendation, Eau Claire said. Then what? We're here because Wexford almost killed himself. Eau Claire's voice didn't change when she said it. She said it the way soldiers talk about hard things, direct without the softening that civilians use because they can't quite look at the shape of it. 8 months ago, he'd been home for 2 years. He'd been through St. Anne's. He'd been through 3 different programs. He had a psychiatrist. He had the whole structure, and he still almost. She stopped. The hallway was quiet. He'd been carrying LaPointe, Ingram said. Carrying the whole thing. The road, the blast, the way it went. He blamed himself because he was the one driving. Because if he'd gone slightly left instead of slightly right, the bison would have taken the secondary device and not LaPointe's section. He exhaled. He'd been carrying that for 3 years. Wexford was looking at the floor. His grip on the cane had tightened, the knuckles going light. I started talking to a peer support worker, Wexford said without looking up, through VAC, and she asked me to go back through the whole thing in detail and tell her what I actually saw, not what I'd been replaying, what I actually saw. He paused. I saw you get to LaPointe. I saw you take his hand. I saw his face change. He looked up then. I don't know if you know this, but his face changed. He stopped fighting. He looked at you and he just stopped being scared. The cardiac monitor at the end of the unit beeped its hollow rhythmic measure into the silence. Tegan was looking at Wexford. She was aware of her own stillness, the deliberate quality of it, the way it had become muscle memory so deep it no longer felt like effort. She thought about LaPointe's face. She had told herself in the years since that she had blocked it, that the mind protects you from the things you can't process. She had told herself this enough times that it had become a wall, solid and smooth and unclimbable. Wexford had just taken a handful of the wall apart. And behind it, not a wound exactly. Just a room she hadn't been inside in 4 years. Just a 22-year-old kid's face going quiet in the way. Faces go quiet when someone is with them. When someone is actually, physically, unambiguously with them. She hadn't known he'd seen it. She hadn't known anyone had seen it. The peer support worker helped me understand that LaPointe wasn't alone, Wexford continued. That someone got to him, that it wasn't just the road and the noise in the dark. Someone got there. He swallowed. That was you, and I needed to find you and tell you that, because I think you've been carrying LaPointe too. In a different way. And I think you deserved to know what his face looked like. Tegan said nothing. The unit was very quiet. Eau Claire reached into the inner pocket of her jacket and removed something small. She held it out flat on her palm. It was a medic's patch, the standard Canadian Forces pattern, dark green with the white cross, smaller than Tegan remembered it being. One corner was burnt, actually burnt. The synthetic fabric melted into a dark fused edge. You left it in the bison, Eau Claire said. You ran out so fast that your vest was half unclipped and your patch had torn off. We picked it up. We kept it. Tegan looked at the patch. She did not reach for it. I left the forces 14 months after that deployment, she said. I didn't look for anyone. I didn't want to be found. She said it without apology. You understand why? Yes, Eau Claire said. Then you understand why I'm telling you I don't want that, Tegan said, nodding at the patch. I walked away from that identity on purpose. I built something here that doesn't have anything to do with who I was then. We know, Ingram said. Then why? Because it's not about identity, Wexford said. It's not about who you were then. It's about what you did on that road, and you deserve to know it mattered. You deserve to hear it from someone who was there. The silence stretched. Tegan thought about the chest freezer at the bottom of her memory. The thing she'd built around that deployment, around the specific afternoon of Route Hyena, around LaPointe's face, which she now knew she had not fully blocked, had not fully protected herself from, had just stopped looking at directly, the way you stop looking at a scar directly. You know it's there. You know the exact dimensions of it. You've just decided not to meet it head on. Wexford had stood in her hallway and described the scar in detail, in good detail, and somehow the world had not ended. She uncrossed her arms. "Is he doing better?" she said. "Wexford, you said 8 months ago. How are you now?" Wexford blinked. The question seemed to catch him unprepared, and she understood that. He'd prepared for many versions of this conversation, but probably not the one where she turned it back toward him. "Better," he said, after a pause. "Actually better. Not fixed, but different. I got a dog. Shepherd mix. He wakes me up when the nightmares go too long." Something loosened very slightly in his face. "His name's Bouchette, named him after the lake. He's enormous, and he thinks he's about 12 pounds. Tegan looked at him for a moment. "Good," she said. She looked at Ingram. "The arm, 2 surgeries," he said. "Full range of motion, about 80% of what it was. I do physiotherapy. He shrugged with the shoulder that worked better. "It's fine. I'm fine." She looked at Auclair. "The fragment wounds." Auclair touched the scar along her cheekbone. "Nerve damage in the cheek. Some numbness. I was lucky." Her voice was dry on the word lucky, the particular dryness of someone who knows exactly how specific their luck was. "You were," Tegan agreed. The cardiac monitor beeped. Outside the window, a car moved through the orange-lit street below, a slow, cautious movement through the slicked snow. Tegan reached out and picked up the patch from Auclair's palm. She turned it over in her hands. The burnt corner was rough against her fingers, slightly gummy where the synthetic had fused. She looked at the white cross, which was still vivid, still bright despite everything. "I'm not going back," she said. "Not to the forces, not to that version of herself. That's not what this means. I'm not, we know," Auclair said. "I'm a ward nurse," Tegan said. "I do nights, I do discharge planning and medication counts, and I have a patient who pushes his call bell compulsively and a unit clerk who wears hoodies over his scrubs all winter, because the heat on this floor is unreliable. That's my life. That's what I built." "It's a good life," Wexford said, simply. Without any layered meaning, Tegan looked at him. "It is," she said, and she heard herself say it, and it was not the reflexive deflection she was used to deploying, the flat, neutral, conversation-terminating agreement. It was something closer to actual belief. She said it, and it rang at a frequency she recognized from before, from a version of herself that had not yet learned to sand everything down to that flat, effectless surface. Auclair gave a single nod. Ingram rolled his shoulders slightly, a barely perceptible adjustment, a soldier's version of saying, "All right then." Wexford turned toward the elevator. They walked out the way they'd come in. No ceremony, no final weighted speech. The heavy footsteps moved in that deliberate, measured pattern down the hall, past the bed where the anxious man was finally sleeping, past the supply cart she'd restocked 4 hours ago, past the board where the overnight admissions were listed in erasable marker. The elevator doors opened, closed. The unit was quiet. Felix came back around the corner 8 minutes later, holding a Tim Hortons cup in each hand, which told her he'd been listening for the footsteps and waiting. He set one cup on the counter in front of her without saying anything. She accepted it. The coffee was too hot and too sweet and tasted completely unlike burnt copper or regret. She turned it over in her hands the way she'd turned over the patch. "You okay?" Felix asked. She considered the question. Not the social reflex version of it, the one that required a fine, thanks, and a redirect. She considered the actual question, the thing underneath the words. "Yeah," she said. She meant something more specific than the word held, but she didn't have the language for it in the middle of a night shift at 20 past 2 in the morning. "I think so." Felix nodded. He sat back down. He put his headphones in one ear, leaving the other open the way good unit clerks did, the way you stayed present without demanding presence back. Tegan set the coffee down and picked up the next chart. The patch was in her chest pocket, tucked flat against her sternum. She could feel the slight stiffness of the fused corner through the fabric. Not heavy, just present. At 7 in the morning, the day shift arrived. The noise and the light of it, coffee from home and traffic complaints and weekend plans traded at the desk while coats came off and passwords were typed in. The ordinary machinery of another morning starting up. Tegan clocked out, pulled on her coat, and walked to the elevator. She rode down to the parkade in silence. She found her car, a gray Civic, with a broken passenger side mirror she kept meaning to replace, and sat in it for a while with the engine running. Through the windshield, the Winnipeg morning was white and pale. The sky so flat and close it looked like a ceiling. She could see her own breath misting in the cold before the heater caught up. She took the patch out of her pocket and set it on the dashboard. It was just fabric, frayed thread and a burnt edge and a white cross that had survived things the person who wore it had not always felt she survived. She thought about LaPointe's face going quiet. She thought about a young man in Petawawa with a dog named Bouchette who woke him from nightmares. She thought about the specific, unremarkable facts of her life. The night shift, the broken mirror, the mediocre coffee that tasted nothing like regret. She put the car in reverse and backed out of the space. The patch stayed on the dashboard, small and improbable in the flat morning light, and she didn't put it away. She drove north, toward her apartment, through the white and ordinary streets of a city that asked nothing of her she didn't choose to give. The road was clear, the sky was bright. The heater finally reached the temperature she needed. If this story stayed with you, tap the like button and share it with someone who understands that the quietest people sometimes carry the loudest histories. Subscribe for more stories about the ones who serve in ways that never make it into the headlines, and drop a comment below. What did you think of Tegan's choice at the end? We'd love to hear from you.